Today I am just using two pencils to create a realistic result, which is drawing some lion eyes in charcoal pencils, and this is the first time that I've actually challenged myself like this. Normally I would be number one working in coloured pencils, and number two I'd be using a lot of pencils as well. So just stripping it down to two pencils is definitely going to be a challenge for me, but I really want to see how well I do. And if you enjoy these types of videos, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell as well so you never miss an update from me. But anyway, let's just jump right on in with the video. So the first thing I want to focus on is layers. Now layers are really important for two reasons. So the first is because it adds value onto the paper, and the second is because it builds up a lot of depth. Now I'm just experimenting with two pencils, as I said, so I'm using the 2B and a 6B pencil for this drawing. And what I first like to do is work in layers. So I like to just typically go in straight away and just start to add some value down. And what I want to do is make sure that I just use the pencil in certain areas. So for the darkest parts of the eyes, so the outlines of the eyes, the pupils and stuff, I just used the 6B pencil, and then I just used the paintbrush and I started to just sweep that powder into other areas to create some value. And what I'm doing here with the pencil swatch is I'm just swatching some pencil down on the paper. And what that is doing is just straight away adding value down onto the paper. So next we have blending. Now I typically do layer blending, and I work like that because it's super important for building up a three-dimensional look in your drawings. You don't just want to have like one layer and then add your highlights and that be it, because there's not going to be enough value or depth and dimension to the drawing. So when I start to put down all of my outlines, I go ahead and also do a lot of blending as well. And what that does is, number one, it gets rid of all like the grain of the paper, so you don't want to have a grainy result or a grainy look. And also what it does is it also creates a lot of depth and dimension just by blending into other areas. So now we're moving on to the blending process, and I actually like to use normally just two tools for blending. So that's either paint brushes and also blending stumps, but you can also use cotton buds and tissue paper as well, even your fingers for blending. So there's lots of different tools that you can use for blending out charcoal. Now there are some differences between paintbrushes and blending stumps. So with paintbrushes you often get like a much more subtle, much softer blending than you do with a blending stump. So as you can see there, I'm getting a really nice subtle result with blending with paintbrushes. With blending stumps you get a lot more like concentrated powder and pigment because it's obviously harder to blend with the blending stumps. So if you want some like darker value, or you really want to like blend right into the paper, then blending stumps might be more appropriate for you. If you're blending with tissue paper, then that's going to give you like a more all-round blending process. So highlights are super important. It was one thing that I used in combination with these pencils. So once I'd built up like all of my different values and all the different areas of depth, I want to create even more contrast, and that is super important for charcoal pencils. Because you're not working in colour, a lot of your realism comes from contrast, because you want to have that contrast between the light and dark areas of a drawing to really make that drawing like pop and stand out. And to create that contrast I use two different types of eraser. So the first one is the Tombow mono eraser, which is like an eraser pen that I use for small details, so for example the eyes. And I also do use the kneaded eraser as well for just lifting up bigger areas of charcoal pencil, and you can see like a side-by-side comparison between both of them as well. But you can just get away with using whatever type of eraser you want to for highlights, and you'd still get a really good result. So as you can see here, I'm just like creating a swatch of pencil, and I'm just going to show you how well like the highlights work and how it can create a lot of contrast. So as you can see, I'm just going in with the Tombow mono eraser, and the thing about charcoal is that it's super easy to create highlights. So it's not like graphite. Sometimes it can be very, very difficult with graphite to lift it off the paper, whereas charcoal comes up a lot more easily, especially with a kneaded eraser. It just literally lifts off the paper. And then what I do is I just go back over the highlights and I just tone them down a little bit, because sometimes they do come up super bright. I mean, they literally lift all the pencil back off the paper, and as I said, it's super important to have a lot of contrast in your drawings. So if I feel like too much has come off the paper, I just go back in, I redefine areas with the pencils, and then I just get that contrast and that value back up again. So now we are talking about values specifically. So I want to talk about how I actually get values in with like 2 pencils. So what I did was I chose 2 pencils from like different spectrums of the gradient chart. So I used a 2B pencil and also a 6B pencil, but the main tip I have for getting in like all your values is actually pencil pressure and also hand position. So those are 2 really important things. So firstly, pencil pressure. So you can see here how I've got like those different swatches and they're gradually getting darker. So a lot of that is to do with the type of pencil pressure that I'm putting on the paper. So I'm using less pencil pressure for the lighter sections and then heavier pencil pressure to get the more darker values. And also with hand position, that's super important, because if you hold the pencil much closer to the tip, then you're going to have a lot of control over that pencil. It's going to mean that you're going to push quite hard on the paper. Whereas if you hold the pencil further down, like I'm doing now, you can actually have less control over the paper, and it's much easier to get a much more softer and subtle result. And the tip with values is obviously super important, because you want to go from like light to dark as well, and have all of those different light, medium and dark values, so that there's a lot of contrast, a lot of depth, and also a lot of dimension as well. So then if you're drawing things like fur, like I'm doing now, super important to get a lot of fur texture, and to do that, a lot of it was to do with values. So I was making sure to include a lot of values into the more darker sections of fur by just shading in a lot of pencil, and then leaving some areas that was like more free of pencil, and then just going in with the highlighter pen, so the eraser, sorry, and just creating the highlights by going in and creating like fur texture. And then just to re-add a bit more definition to the fur, I just like to go in with the black pencil again, and this one, sorry, is the 6B, and I just literally go in and I just create a lot of depth. So what I actually did was I used the 2B pencil mainly in like the lighter sections of the fur or the face of the lion, and then to get a lot more depth and a lot more value, I used the 6B pencil because it's a lot darker, and that is typically how I used both pencils. So I did briefly just mention this, but I wanted to show you in practice what hand position looks like. So first of all, I'm holding the pencil pretty near the tip. Now, as you can see, that means that the pencil is sort of facing downwards, so that means that if you're pressing on the paper, then you're going to get a lot of pressure just concentrating in that area. Then if we sort of hold it further down, then you're more likely to get less pressure on the paper because you're holding it at a more horizontal angle, so therefore obviously you're going to be able to create a lot lighter values. And as you can see, I've definitely created a variation of tone and a variation of values. There's some areas that are much lighter, and it's a lot easier for me to go in with the eraser and actually lift those areas up. And then I've also got some areas that are a lot darker in terms of its value and things. And then it's the same process as with the other eye, so I literally just started with like all of my outlines and getting in all of those dark values. And again, I just made sure that I used both the pencils in combination with each other to get like the best results in terms of the value and all the different shades and tones and things. So I used this 6B pencil to get in like the main outlines, and I did also use the 2B pencil to just go over areas and just add a little bit more shade in, but not where it was like overpowering and really dark. So as you can see, I used quite a bit of the 2B pencil in the eye to create more shadowed areas in the eye, and then I used the Tombow mono eraser to pull up highlights as well. And then that in combination with using the paintbrush for blending is super important, because it will give you that realistic result if you're working in layers and you're blending and you're adding in a lot of different details and values and things. And then right at the end of the drawing, what is really important is definitely like the tweaking part of the process. So once I've actually finished off a drawing, I just take some time to just look at it, and then I just go in and I again just create a lot more value and a lot more depth where I need to. And especially when you're just using 2 pencils, that's super important because you're very limited in terms of what you're using. So you want to make sure that there is all that contrast and there is all those values. So I really hope that you did enjoy today's video. If you did and you're new around here, then don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell as well so that you never miss an update from me. I upload art videos and other videos here every single week, so you definitely don't want to miss out on all the fun on my channel. And if you have any video suggestions for a future video, don't forget to leave them down below in the comments section because I'd love to hear all of your suggestions. But anyway guys, thank you so much for watching, keep creating, and I'll see you soon. Bye!